Hi. Welcome to another live stream. I think everything's all on. Give a bit of time for people to come on. There's 3 of you here so far. So this is my 8th one of these live sleep stories. I've managed to actually get on here pretty much bang on 10 p.m., which is quite good. Let's move that a little bit so it picks up my voice. So if you're good evening, if you're watching this on repeat on replay at all, then and you just want the sleep story, skip halfway through, skip 30 minutes in, and whatever sleep story I create, it should be there. If you're not hello, if you're not subscribed, then obviously subscribe if you like this or find it interesting. And likewise, feel free to give it a thumbs up if you want. I think everyone who's commenting so far are people I've seen here before, so you'll already know how this works. We'll have a bit of a chat, and I'll respond to any questions, etc. Then I'll get any ideas from yourselves, which I will scribble down in my purpley pink ink on my pad, and then I will somehow figure out how to put it all together into some kind of story. So I quite liked last week's story. I think it went on for 58 minutes or something. There was lots of really good ideas to put together in that. At the top of my page, it just says live sleep story 8, number 8. So no real reason why I need to put a number on it, because I know what it is. It's just what I do. So from time to time, as those of you who've seen this before will know, I look off over at the side of the screen when I'm trying to read your comments. But I try to look at the camera as much as possible. Obviously, if I was doing this without yourselves there, so I think there are some of my sleep stories where, like the ones with the inductions first, like the 1, 2, 3, 3, 2, 1 things. I just do that looking straight at the camera because I'm not having to read anything, and I'm just talking to an empty room facing my wall. So let's have a look. Da-da-da. Yeah, if I ever become famous, I have dozens and dozens of notepads filled with ideas and things. I'm still a bit sort of old school. I prefer handwriting everything rather than scribbling on mobile phones and things like that. So I have lots of ideas written down for different things. And obviously this pad is quite full of sleep story stuff. Yeah, I probably won't include Brexit in a sleep story, so nobody suggest it. And I probably won't include Trump in a sleep story either. Probably won't go near politics, full stop, because I'm sure that whatever way I wrote a story or told a story, it would upset someone somewhere. Yep. I say yep. No one has a clue what I'm saying yep to. I was just reading the handwriting comment. So this week there's been a lot in relation to YouTube around the new copper rules that are coming out in January. YouTube was hit with a big fine. I think I might have talked about this on the last video as well. YouTube was hit with a big fine for showing targeted ads at children under 13. And so there's a new rule that's coming in January where any channels that have videos that an under 13-year-old may find interesting, as far as the US government's concerned, those channels per video will get fined about $42,000. Um, so I've had to say this channel isn't for children, and I've had to go through marking all of my sleep stories for children, and I've marked my Minecraft videos, which aren't for children, were never done for children, but Minecraft is obviously something children might be interested in. I've had to mark them as for children as well. So, so that's been fun trying to go through that to make sure that I don't get hit with $42,000 worth of fines per video that the US government feels could be interesting to children. So I don't know how there's big debate at the moment about how that's going to change the landscape on YouTube, because it's quite strict rules. If you have videos marked for children or a channel marked for children, none of those things get promoted. They don't get shown. So, for example, if it was decided that my adult bedtime stories or my bedtime stories for grown-ups could be of interest to under 13-year-olds, and the US government decided that, or YouTube said, we think this is the case, and that I would possibly get fined if I didn't say these could be of interest to children, then as soon as you do that and mark them as for children, you lose the ability for people to comment on videos. No subscribers get shown that there's new videos. They don't show up on subscribers' feeds or anything. So the only way for anyone to find the videos is to actually come to the channel and look for it themselves. And you lose about 90% of your income from advertising as well on YouTube videos. So I've done some with horses before. But yeah, so so I'm cutting in a comment from something I'm reading, and I've done the Northern Lights a couple of recent times as well. So yeah, so it's something that I'm hoping doesn't end up affecting my channel, because I do make it clear that my stories are for grown-ups, apart from the ones I did that I said are for children. But obviously, if it's felt that they were showing for children, then no one would get notifications. I wouldn't be able to do live videos like this. I wouldn't be able to have comments on my videos, and I'd make about 90% less income on my videos. So it's quite a negative thing. Let me have a look over here. Yeah, religion. I've often thought about reading the Bible. I like Bible stories. That may sound odd. Not all Bible stories, but I like some of them. I find some of them interesting and some of them just unusual. But then I like things like the Iliad and the Odyssey and all sorts of old literature. And I find it quite interesting to read those sort of books. So I've thought about like just working my way through reading the Bible. The thing that stopped me is that I've thought no one on my channel might be interested, and obviously I wouldn't be reading it because of being religious or anything like that. I'd be reading it because I find the stories interesting. There are often, depends on what you're reading, but there are some good morals in some of the stories and good messages and learning lessons. And then there are some that just everyone dies and everything gets destroyed. But the whole don't talk about politics and religion thing, and the royal family at the moment. Yeah, that's why I've not done the Bible yet, because I don't want people to either say because I'm not religious somehow it's a bad thing that I'm reading the Bible, or to say that I shouldn't be reading the Bible because it's religious, if that makes sense. Oh, it's just jumped down again. I'm trying to read down the comments, but it suddenly jumps. Every time someone posts a comment, it jumps to that comment before I've read down to it. Yes, I tried to make sure it was clear before the owl saved the gerbil. So, spoiler alert for anyone who doesn't know. Um, in that last story, I tried to make it clear that the owl was going to rescue the gerbil. So, I didn't want people to think that the owl was swooping down to eat the gerbil right in the middle of a nice, relaxing story, or what I hoped was a relaxing story. Um, I can't even remember what I said in the volcanic island story. That was one created based on. So before I did these live ones, those of you who've been around long enough will know that last year I, using the community tab, did a similar thing where I said, give me ideas and I'll take those ideas and then turn them into a story and then say, here's the story created with your ideas. And the first story, lots of people contributed ideas to, and we whittled it down to a bunch of ideas that everyone agreed on. And we did like, give ideas a thumbs up if you like it, and then I can choose the ones that seem to get the most likes. So we did all that, and it worked really well. And I can't even remember what the story was. It might have been the Volcano Island one. And then the next time I did it, I think only a handful of people contributed, and then I think only one person contributed the third time I did it. So it kind of fizzled out doing it that way. Whereas here, you lot come up with tons of ideas, and at the point that I say, right, I'm just about to start, you're still normally throwing ideas at me. So let me scroll back, see if I've missed anything. So yeah, and I think I said in a comment to somebody today or yesterday that I often forget my stories the second I've spoken them. So I don't normally remember them even as I am telling them, really, but I forget them as soon as I've spoken them. And so this long after, for example, I can't remember the Volcano Island one, other than the fact I do remember that there's a turtle in it, and I think you go underwater with the turtle or something. And obviously, I know there's a volcano in it and an island. Um, but yeah, I try to get people absorbed in the detail of doing things because it's about. Some people don't like it. Some people listen to my stories thinking it should be a typical. One day, John woke up and went out on an errand, and John did X, Y, and Z, and then something happened, and then it was the end of the story. Um, and they might throw in tell it like an actual story. And they might even add speech. And so I add speech sometimes, but it's there's often a reason for doing that. It gives me a chance to embed ideas for those who know about such things. But obviously, when you're trying to fall asleep, what you need to do is try and shut up your brain. You need to stop yourself talking to yourself and stop yourself focusing on other things. And so I want people to get absorbed in the experience of the story, not just in listening to being told a story. So I want things like noticing clouds in the sky, noticing what bark feels like on a tree, noticing what grass feels like, reaching down, touching the grass, noticing the temperature of the grass, etc., etc. If you're building something, I want someone to get into the idea of searching for, say, wood, finding wood, coming back, setting up a camp, building a camp. The next morning, maybe covering over the fire pit. Things that seem almost like they're looked over in normal stories. You probably wouldn't necessarily talk about those bits. It would just be they put up the tent, and then you'd maybe move on to something else. And yet it's the fine details that when you focus on those, they're the bits which get you more absorbed in that experience rather than focusing on your own thoughts and having your mind wander to something completely different. And obviously, not every story I say is going to resonate with every person. Different people like different types of stories. But once you find some that work for you and that you think, oh, actually, I quite like that story, then it's quite nice to be able to stick with them. But hopefully, there's enough variety on the channel that you can find something that works. Yeah, there's tons of rules on YouTube. They've got new terms and conditions coming out on the 10th of December. One of the terms that they've added, which is getting everyone on YouTube kind of going a bit crazy, is that they've added a bit that says if we deem your channel not to be, I can't remember how it's worded, but something like financially viable or something like that, then we can terminate the channel. And so there are bits like that that kind of people are thinking, well, how do you determine that? Because if you're a new YouTuber, you don't have monetization, you don't have any way of earning YouTube money or yourself money. So how do they decide? Oh no, commercially viable. That's the term they use. If we don't deem your channel commercially viable, we can just close your channel. So there's all sorts of bits that YouTube throws out there that get people. An albino bunny, I haven't. You've got an albino bunny. I haven't included one of them. So maybe a white rabbit. I'm definitely going to continue reading the Iliad and the Odyssey. I obviously want to read both. It's not the easiest thing to read. So part of it is that I worry about, obviously you get good people. All of you who are over here on the side are good people. You make nice comments. But I obviously do get comments that say, haha, you said so-and-so's name wrong. And talking about Greek names and things isn't something that I am very good at doing. So yeah, so I started that. I read chapter 1, which took me about an hour and 10 minutes or something to read. And so I was going to move on to chapter 2. But that'll take me a while. Noah's Ark may well be cute, but it's only cute until literally everyone and every living thing on the entire planet is wiped out, apart from those on the boat. And it's jumped down again. Yeah, Lara, I recommend checking out the Volcanic Island story. It was an interesting story. I remember that much. It's a bit like when I do these ones. People give me completely random things to work with, and then I just somehow put it together. Yes, I'm wearing a. I've got Santa top on, but I'm wearing a or Homer top, fluffy fleece because it is cold here. So somewhere warm might be nice in a story. Perry the Platypus. That sounds like something I'd put in one of my kids' books. I think I've done a few glitch in the Matrix type stories. Sometimes explaining what the glitch is, other times not making it clear, sort of overtly. Joyce, yeah, I do a mixture of from characters' perspectives and from your perspective, so to speak. It depends on the type of story and what I'm doing, and sometimes I mix and match as well, which annoys people. But when I do mix and match it, I'm doing it therapeutically. Yeah, I had a fairground in my story the other day. I haven't seen a weasel riding on a woodpecker. I did when the whole elf on a shelf thing was going around. I did do Darren on a heron and made a picture of Darren Brown on a heron. Being a Darren Brown fan. And I have recently done a whole bunch of stories from first person perspective. I've done a bear, igloo, and northern lights reasonably frequently. Yeah, I haven't had a weasel yet. Yeah, they all got on a boat, went for a little trip, and lived happily ever after. That's the alternative version. Um, yeah, the difficulty with reading classics is I'm just keeping track of time as well. Difficulty with reading classics is I've got to find versions of the book that were um, printed, say, 100 years ago or more, so that they're definitely out of print. Definitely out of copyright for that specific edition. So obviously, one thing within copyright law is, for example, reading the Iliad. Um, reading the Iliad obviously is a really, really old story, and so you would think I should be able to just go into a shop, pick one off the shelf, and read it because it's a really old story. But every version is a copyrighted version. So what some authors will do is they will put in certain words that don't look out of place, but that are words that they specifically have put into that edition, so that they will know if you're reading, say, a 2015 Iliad, because those words would only be in that version by that, say, person who wrote it down into that version, but wouldn't be in, say, one 100 years ago. So that's why I wouldn't ever risk reading a say modern version of, say, an old classic, because that modern printing of that old classic could obviously, well, is copyrighted, um, and could have things in. So Grimm's fairy tales, I've got an old Grimm's fairy tale book. I found them too short to read, but I have thought about reading them, or reading one and then doing my reinterpretation of it so I can extend it to, say, 30 minutes or something. Um, some of them are very, very dark if you go back to the original ones rather than some of the light, fluffy, more modern versions. I've got other old books of fairy tales and things, and so I do have a lot of old books like that. But yeah, so I've thought about reading different classics and things, but I do have to make sure that I am actually reading from a very old copy, so that I know that that specific version is out of print. Because I think copyright is something like 100 years plus 25 years after the author's death, or something like that. I can't remember. Um, I did look it up, but I can't remember off the top of my head. So reading stuff from like 100 years ago is likely to be okay and out of current copyright. I can't remember what I wrote in the Fantasy Quest, what I told in the Fantasy Quest story either. Right, let me write some of these ideas down. If people want to shout some of them out again, just so I can see them in a row rather than have to keep scrolling up and down. So I know there was a beaver and a weasel, and there was a white rabbit somewhere in there, which obviously makes me think of the Matrix instantly. Floating and flying, an ocelot. One challenge is obviously knowing off the top of my head what every single animal looks like and how they can encounter each other when they all come from very different locations. That's something else. Obviously, a story should be just a story. Uh, but you do get people who say, oh, they don't live up there. Like me including a penguin in an Egyptian story. Um, yep, people yelling at their computers. Floating and flying. I had this really stupid idea today. I thought, I wonder how long I could sit here if I just said to you guys, reel off a whole bunch of things to create a story with. I thought, I wonder if I could do like the longest live sleep story. and just sit here for like 8 hours telling the same story based on dozens and dozens of ideas from you. So, how I work, for those who don't know, is I don't like anything too specific because obviously I have to try and fit it all together. So, if something's really specific, like space rat, well, if I can talk, space rats from Mars stealing cheese on Earth, means that to get to that, that's a very specific outcome in the middle of a story. Doesn't mean it wouldn't happen, but it's like when someone gives me an exact location on the planet and almost like telling me the whole story that they would like. Um, it then doesn't fit with all the other ideas, or I just get through it. I think I've talked about this before, that I just end up getting through it too quickly. Um, just trying to write. I just end up getting through it too quick because it's like, well, it's already completed now because you've written it in a sentence, and so I've got nothing to add, and then I end up not adding anything. Um, yeah, I thought about a small fire-breathing dragon the other day, obviously with the latest John Lewis advert, for those who've seen it, with Edgar. If you haven't seen it, I recommend checking out the John Lewis advert. Trying to write cheese. Tiny dragon. Yeah, I do seem to get a lot of requests for lots and lots of animals. Robot. A horse again. Yeah, exactly. Penguin was on holiday. It might have been trying to escape the killer whales for hours and hours and hours and was happy to jump on the boat. Yeah, animals and food. Ancient temples, caving. I try to avoid some aspects of caving. I try to avoid ending up going into small cave holes where people might be listening along thinking, no, that's actually too scary. Um, and when I do mention something that's a bit scary or that could be a bit scary to someone, I often try and say beforehand they feel comfortable, or at some point they know they're safe and they feel comfortable. They're just uncertain, or something like that. I had someone comment on one of my stories today that they didn't like the fact that the character um, felt nervous being followed in a cave, even though I specifically say um, they noticed they were being followed. They felt a bit uncertain about this, but they knew that it was safe and that they were okay and that they weren't at any. There was no threat. And I'd specifically mentioned all that, but the person obviously listening said they didn't like it, and said that's the stuff of nightmares was their comment. Yeah, I often have exploration in nearly all of my stories of some kind. Space station. I've not yet managed to take a photo of that. Took a photo of Mercury passing across the sun the other day, but haven't got the space station yet. Nearly all of mine end up with people facing fears, and either I get to the waking up happy, but I always do the going to bed happy. A picnic. Oh, let's jump down again. Let me write down picnic. I'm bound to have missed something. I always do. I've just done some with pyramids, including my no, second to most recent story, I think it was. I can't remember. Was the woman going into the pyramid and finding the tunnel at the back of the pyramid that goes down like a water chute down to another land, and then exploring that land, finding a pyramid in that land. And for those who haven't got that far, I won't reveal the rest. But that was the other day that one went live. I think maybe Thursday or something. I've done some where you go into a pyramid and end up in space. Normally, I just teleport straight up there. Ladybirds. As usual, my biggest challenge will be reading my handwriting, so I will start the story soon. Over here in Chichester, we have plenty of ruins of ancient Roman bathhouses and stuff like that, being a Roman city. And I've just recently done some secret room houses, but I will write that down. Somewhere with secret rooms. One that for a while was popular was me doing stepping into pictures and things. Yep, Luigi's Mansion. That's cool. I like No Man's Sky as well. Right, I've probably missed something. Oh no, I've not. I've encountered some non-calm aliens in No Man's Sky. Deserted Island. That's another common one in my stories. Planet with creatures. What did I see? Deserted Island. Oh, everything's jumped again. I included the lion and a tiger in my last story. In the Sphinx, for those who haven't heard it. Before heading off to a rainbow-coloured waterfall that flows upwards. Just to make it sound like I'm not odd. Let's see. I can't remember which one. I've got lots of them with stepping into pictures. It went through a stage where people were saying they liked it, so I did it in a few different stories. So I can't remember which ones off the top of my head. Stepping into pictures, mirrors. I mentioned it, so I suppose I better put it down. And I kind of did that in one of the live ones recently as well. Having a live Q&A about me and my life wouldn't be too intrusive. I am very open about answering pretty much anything at all. and pretty much everything about my life I wrote down in my autobiography, my Look Into My Eyes autobiography about growing up autistic, um, positives and negatives of that, etc. Where am I? Oh, keeps jumping. Yeah, if I can remember the names and details of any Greek gods, I might include them. That's the trouble with anything that's too specific. If I don't know enough about it off the top of my head, um, it's harder to include. A ship sailing around the world might be a stretch at fitting that in with everything else on here because the world is quite large, especially if we're already going to space and Mars and weird alien planets. That would be a very long story. Yeah, I'll probably include pretty much everything, and everyone will be asleep in 5 minutes and miss everything that I've just talked to myself about. Um, a Bigfoot type creature. I'm running out of page room. I've met Doctor Who, just for Joyce there. I met Sylvester McCoy. He came and filmed as Doctor Who in Arundel back in, I think, 1988. And they were using Arundel Castle as a stand in for Windsor Castle for some of the scenes and started filming outside uh, my school. So obviously, we were all kids who thought we could either do our schoolwork or run outside very fast to meet Doctor Who. So we ran outside very fast to meet Doctor Who. Um, let's have a look. Yes, I strongly recommend. Someone commented fairly recently. I best start the story in a minute, or else I'll get complaints that it's starting 7 minutes late. Um, and I've probably got enough to start with. I've literally got an entire page. Every line is filled with something. Um, I have forgotten what I was about to say. Yeah, uh, someone complained about how negative my stories were and how harmful they were and how they give such horrible suggestions and imagery and stuff, and that people should stop listening. And if only you knew what you were listening to, all these comments saying love your stories but I'm asleep in 5 minutes and all the rest of it. And I kind of had a bit of a, not an argument, but I was sort of standing my ground saying I'm happy for anyone to listen to them through kind of consciously, so to speak, because there's nothing in them that anyone, and I actively recommend that if people are interested in what's in the story and interested in trying to think, oh, I wonder what Dan's doing here, to just listen to them. But yeah, so I do. That was because of the comment saying about listening to one on the way home from work or whatever it was. Um, yeah, so I do recommend if anyone is interested, just listen to them in normal everyday kind of when you're walking around, not when you're like operating machinery and stuff where you might give in and kind of get absorbed in it, especially if you're used to listening to my voice. Um, but yeah, so I just sort of argued that actually I don't see anything wrong with them. Do I use subliminal messaging? It depends how you define subliminal messaging. I don't like have some kind of secret messages going in that you're not at all aware of, but I do use techniques to kind of make it that you're not necessarily likely to be aware of exactly what I'm doing. So, for example, I might start talking in third person and then say something like, um, and then you, and then I might say something in first person because I'm referring to you as the person listening, perhaps about managing anxiety or managing stress or worry or anything like that. Um, so I use techniques like that, which consciously, so it's kind of subliminal. Consciously, people don't realize that that's what I've done because they're just listening along to the story or whatever it is. But I've then done that kind of bit. So yeah, so I totally call them hypnotic stories because I am using hypnotic techniques. I use vague language. I use all sorts of techniques to kind of get ideas through. Um, and all my stories end happy, and all my stories have um, elements where there might be some uncertainty, but the character in the story experiences the uncertainty, and then that character in the story overcomes the uncertainty, which obviously a lot of worry and a lot of anxiety is where people are struggling with uncertainty and trying to overcome that uncertainty. So I obviously have the character do what kind of the pattern of what I want the person who's listening to do if they have that as their problem. So yeah, anyway, I've got to get started. I'm 10 minutes late. That's a bit of a slap on the wrist for me. Um, just seeing. Dan Tarantino. Bit of a long surname. Jones is a bit shorter. But yeah, I'm looking forward to hopefully a Tarantino Star Trek film. Yeah, I listen to things like stories to help me relax as well at daytimes. And I listen to them like if I'm ill or anything and I just need to have something that keeps me in a relaxed state. Um, yeah, so I will. I'm just going to finish reading these comments. Hopefully, nothing else will spring up. So I will start the story. I have my list. Those of you who want to follow along now can. Those who perhaps are busy or watching election based things can go off and do that and come back and listen later or wait till Saturday. And on Saturday, obviously, I will have hopefully edited the story from this and uploaded it to my channel um, for you to listen to then without any of me coughing or anything else I might do, like slurping water. Thank you. Another fairy. Fairies seem to crop up nearly every week. I will write fairy down. I think it was a green fairy last time or something. No, green fairy the time before. So, I will try to ignore the comments now. So, if you're falling asleep to this, just take a moment to close your eyes and begin to allow yourself to get comfortable and begin to drift off asleep. And as you begin to drift asleep, I'll just tell a story in the background. And it's a story about you waking up one morning and you wake up on a boat that's traveling around the world. And you're on a cruise traveling from country to country. And you've come on this cruise for a special occasion. You're celebrating that special occasion. And you've come on this cruise alone. to be able to find yourself, to be able to find a sense of peace, a sense of calm, to be able to focus on connecting with the world around you, to know that you're in control of your journey, that you can decide to do what you want to do as you learn from the experience. And so you walk up on the deck, breathe in that sea air, looking around, seeing sea all the way out to the horizon. And as you look in one direction, you can be curious about the way the sky and the sea match in their blueness, so much so that you can barely make out the point where the sky and the sea meet. And you look in another direction, you can see the way the sun glistens across the water. And in the distance, you can see a humpback whale breaching, turning in the air, and splashing down on its back. And as you walk to the front of the boat, so you can notice a pod of dolphins riding the bow wave, jumping over each other, almost surfing along with the boat. And you're able to look down on them, and voluntarily they're choosing to be there. And you're aware that that's not like when they're in captivity, made to do tricks because people tell them what to do. They've got a whole ocean, and they've chosen to come to the boat, chosen to play. And at any point, they'll pull away and go off and do whatever they choose. And the boat's large enough that you barely notice any movement from passing over the waves. The biggest tell that you're moving is actually the breeze on your face. And you can breathe in that salty air, clearing your nose, breathing in, almost filling you with a sense of relaxation. Almost like you can breathe out any tension. And you find somewhere to sit near the front of the boat. You relax back. And from your perspective, looking forward, you can almost have that sense like you're flying. Like you can see the horizon, you can see the ocean, you can see the sky. But you can only see a little bit of the boat. And the longer you gaze out at the horizon, the more you seem to stop being aware of that bit of the boat. In the same way that when you become absorbed watching a TV program, you stop being aware of the room you're sitting in. You just become totally absorbed with that program. And you just lie back, relaxing in that chair, gazing out to sea, feeling like you're flying. And as there's nothing stimulating in view, your eyes begin to get heavy, and they begin to do extended blinks, almost like blinking with each out breath, before those eyes totally shut. And then, with your eyes shut, you start to become more aware of the sounds around you. The sound of the water beneath you as the boat pushes through. The sound of the motor. The sound of the breeze passing past your ears. And the distant sound of a seagull. And as you focus on that seagull, so you begin to have a sense of becoming that seagull, soaring over the ocean, flying up high, catching up drafts, circling around higher and higher in the sky, seeing further and further in all directions, diving down rapidly, swooping up, being able to fly so gracefully. And then, as that seagull, you gaze up and see an aeroplane way, way up in the sky. And you know that as this seagull, you'd never be able to fly that high. But you imagine what it would be like to be up on that plane. And then as you find yourself on that plane, you can hear someone counting down 3, 2, 1, jump. And then you look and see someone leaping out of the open side of the plane. And then you see the next person get 3, 2, 1, jump. And then they just leap out of the plane. And you're curious about this experience. And you look down at your body and notice that you're wearing a parachute. And so you decide to have a go. You walk over, you get hooked onto a bar that's attached to the back of the parachute. It becomes your turn. The person at the door says 3, 2, 1, then jump. And you jump out the plane, spread your arms and legs. The parachute automatically opens behind you. And within just a few seconds, you feel that jolt as you decelerate with the open parachute, and almost feel like you've risen up slightly, when in fact you've just lowered down slower. And you look around, and in the distance, you can see some islands. You can see clouds beneath you, clouds above you. You can feel the wind on your face as you steer yourself down and feel like you're gliding and floating so gracefully, so silently, so peacefully. And it begins to remind you of an experience of being in a hot air balloon, that experience of just floating over the land below, and in this case, over the sea below, so silently. And you see a circle of boats, and you know that you need to head to land in that circle. And so you descend, you pull on one cord and pull on another to steer your way down, slowly, carefully, floating down through the air. And you see those that jumped before you, landing on target, one after the other, about a minute apart from each other, giving time for the previous person to move out the way. As you come down and splash land also, and as you land in the water, so in your imagination, you suddenly realize that you've become a shark. That suddenly everything changes again. You feel that sense of your body moving side to side. And you notice the difference in the senses that you have as a shark. Noticing that you feel this kind of tingling and almost just have a bit like images, but not images, of things around you. And you notice that you're perceiving the electrical impulses, electrical fields of other fish swimming around. And you have this sense like you can see them, but it's almost like seeing a shadow. And as a shark, you dive down deeper, exploring the ocean, noticing being so streamlined. It doesn't take much of a flick of your tail to propel you down deeper into the ocean, noticing the way the light begins to fade as you go down deeper and deeper. And the deeper you go into the ocean, the calmer and slower moving everything seems to be, which helps to increase feelings of relaxation, peacefulness. And as you near the bottom of the ocean here, you begin to notice it being almost like white sand that moves and fluffs up in the movement of the water from each flick of your tail. And as you continue swimming along, so you begin to notice a distant sound of a horn, and you realize that the horn on the ship is sounding. And you begin to drift back from the reverie as you gaze out across the front of the boat. And you notice that there's some land up ahead that's now come into view. And as the boat arrives at the land, so you disembark. And you'll be spending a day on this island. And so you start to explore the island, check yourself into the hotel. And as you explore the island, you find a river. And you follow that river up to a lake. And beyond the lake is a waterfall. And above the waterfall, the river continues. And you climb up and you can see that that river continues all the way over to some mountains in the distance. And you wander round near the lake, hearing the sound of the waterfall, feeling some of the spray from the waterfall. And as you explore, so you become curious about something, that there are many trees around the outside of the lake that just seem to have marks on them or be totally chewed down. And you suspect that somewhere there are some beavers, but you can't see any signs of them. And so you decide to explore, see if you can find them. And you head up above the waterfall. You follow that river, being aware of how calm that river's flowing. And as you follow that river, you reach a point where the river seems to divide into two. And one side seems to be calm, flowing slow, and the other side seems to be flowing faster. So you follow the calm side, heading in the direction of the mountains. And after some time of walking, you notice that there's a dam across the river. And you're surprised at how large this dam is, and that this dam is built by beavers. And you can see some of those beavers walking around near the dam, diving into the water, and then coming back, walking around again, and getting back in the water, seeming to be hard at work. And as you walk around the dam, so you notice that a man made dam further up the river seems to have cracked and crumbled, and that if it wasn't for this dam created by the beavers, this water would have flooded all the way down to the village near the river, down near the sea, and that these beavers have probably saved that village. And yet, everyone at the village is completely unaware of this. And you don't know whether the beavers did that on purpose, or whether it was just coincidence. And you head back the way you came, and you know that at the village you'll mention to somebody what you've seen, so that hopefully the man made dam can be fixed, and anything that needs to be done can be done. But you know those beavers had done a brilliant job, and that their dam would easily hold. And as you near the village after you've reported what you've seen, you wander off into the nearby woodland. You enjoy spending time away from all the other people. Time alone, time where you can reflect and focus on personal growth and development, and on looking after yourself, because you're aware that people spend too much time focusing on trying to survive life. They miss the opportunity to focus on living life and on learning how to make the journey enjoyable. And so you've taken this opportunity to do so, to focus on yourself for a while. And so as you head into the woodland, notice the sounds of woodland birds. Notice any village sounds disappearing in the distance, sounds of the rustling leaves and of each footstep you take. And then deep in the woodland, where the sun struggles to reach, just the occasional shard of light dances in front of you, managing to creep its way through the branches and leaves overhead. A shard of light reflects off the back of something on the ground, and that something then moves and catches your eye more. And you notice that there's a white rabbit, and it's hopping around, munching some food, and then hopping around some more. And the old saying, follow the white rabbit, comes to mind. And so you decide to follow that white rabbit. And it turns off the track you're on and effortlessly manages to get through the woods. Whereas you, as a full-sized human, has to push through branches and squeeze through. But you manage to keep up with that rabbit. And you have this sense that somehow that rabbit, you think, seems to know that you're following it. Because every time you struggle to push through, the rabbit seems to stop, as if it's waiting to allow you to catch up. And when you're walking freely and easily, the rabbit seems to hop along faster. But you continue to follow that white rabbit. Then eventually you see that rabbit arrive at an area with a couple of rabbit holes. And it looks back at you. And then it looks at the holes. And then it looks back at you again. And then it looks at the holes again. And then it makes the decision of which hole to follow. And it jumps into one of the holes. And you instantly think there's no chance of you following it now. Because you obviously can't fit in a rabbit hole. But you decide that you'll go over and sit near the holes, and wait near the holes, and at some point the rabbit will come back. And maybe it'll let you pet it. But as you go near those holes, suddenly it's almost like a force seems to suddenly drag you into one of the holes, like you got too close and suddenly fell in. And you find yourself almost teleported through one of those rabbit holes, the same one that white rabbit just took. And in almost like a flash, you find yourself in a strange place. You look around, there's a purple sky, there's a red sun, there's deep purple flowers with black leaves, and orange grass. At least these are the best descriptions that you could give to them. And you can see that white rabbit just sitting there, eating some of that grass. Then you see a furry creature with legs that look a bit like frogs' legs, leaping near the rabbit and jumping in some water. And then swimming across the water, jumping out the other side. and looking as dry as it did when it jumped in. You notice there's something odd about the fur of that animal that seems to make it so that fur is water repellent. And you gaze up in the sky because you think you can see some birds out the corner of your eye. And instead, the best you could describe is that they look a bit like pterodactyls circling overhead. And then up on a rock, you see the cutest little creature that's barely bigger than your hand. When it opens its mouth, it seems to make a squeak, that kind of squeak that some kittens make. And you find it so cute, you go over to investigate it further. And you start petting that unusual, green, lizardy looking creature that has the biggest eyes, almost like puppy dog eyes. And as you pet it, suddenly you jump back a bit startled because instead of purring like maybe a cat would, once it seems to enjoy the petting, suddenly a flame came out its mouth as it opened its mouth. And it wasn't a big flame or a scary flame, but it was unexpected. But it doesn't react beyond just having that flame come out its mouth, almost like burping a flame. And so you carry on petting it, but make a bit of a mental note not to have it facing you while you're doing this. And then it climbs up onto your other arm and rests on your lap as you carry on petting it. And you can feel it vibrating slightly, similar to how cats vibrate as they purr. And it seems to really like you. And you decide you want to continue exploring this area, exploring this strange place you've ended up. And so you go to put that little dragon creature back down. But as you put it down on the rock, so it just jumps up on your arm, climbs up onto your shoulder. And so you take it down off your shoulder, put it back on the rock, and it just jumps up again, climbs up on your shoulder. And then it nuzzles its head against the side of your neck and gently rubs you, making a slight purring sound, a slight squeaky sound. And so you decide that you'll explore, but you suppose you're going to have to keep that on your shoulder for now, because it seems to like you. And so as you continue to explore this land, you notice that there's a low kind of hum to this land. You don't quite know what it is, but it seems to be a bit like the sound of wind, but a much deeper quieter, more distant sounding sound. You notice that you feel a bit lighter here as you walk around, and that there's something unusual about the colours of everything. Many of the colours are much darker, and the sun is much redder, and it's unusual having a purple sky. And then as you walk into some trees, you notice that two of the trees seem to move, and then realize that their long legs, a little bit like legs of a giant bird. But as you get closer and look, it's almost like bird legs attached to a lizard or a dinosaur's body, with a strangely long neck and a small head that seems to be allowing it to eat from the tops of these tall trees. And you can see some tiny bird-like creatures that seem to be perched on its head and landing on its body, and then they would fly off its head and off its body into the space beneath the leaves, whereas this creature pulled on the leaves, small little bits would fall off, perhaps almost like little tiny bits of fruit, and the birds would quickly dive off and catch those little bits mid-air, and then land back on this creature again. And this creature didn't seem to mind them being there. It was as if everyone has their niche. And nothing was really paying attention to them being there, to you walking around. You seemed to be able to just walk around, almost unnoticed, with everything around you just carrying on its day as if you weren't even there. And a part of you is still curious how you got here, what that rabbit hole was, why you had that feeling of following the white rabbit. And you continue to explore this land, this strange alien world. And you can see what looks like a cave entrance in the distance. So you decide to head towards that cave, explore the cave. And as you near the cave, so you see what looks like a floating robot that seems to be just hovering and moving, and looks like it almost has small jets around its body, but they're not combustion jets. but you can't tell what they are. They just seem to glow, possibly a bit like plasma. But you also know it isn't plasma. You can't feel any heat from it, and you can get very close to this robot. It's almost like it's got arms, and it looks like it has a face, even though it probably doesn't have a need for a face. And you wonder who built this robot, where it came from, and you're curious about the fact that people have a tendency, and perhaps even other aliens have a tendency for wanting things to look familiar. And all animals will have mouths, will have sensory organs, and likely to survive, all animals will have stereoscopic senses so that they can pinpoint different things in the space around them and react accordingly. And so it makes sense that an advanced civilization would probably have these and would probably design a robot to vaguely resemble what looks familiar. And the robot talks to you as if it just happened to know your language. And this takes you by surprise. But at the same time, the whole experience is weird. So you just go with the flow. Treat it as part of your journey. The robot asks, "Do you want me to light the way?" And you ask, "What way?" And the robot says, "Do you want me to light the cave?" And so you agree that that'd be a nice thing, that would be helpful. And you start walking towards the cave. And as you head towards the cave, so the robot almost silently seems to glide along with you and head into the cave with you. And then its eyes seem to light the way. And as you walk into the cave, so you can notice how the sound changes. And for the first time on this planet, you feel a sense of familiarity. The sound of water dripping in one cave seems to sound pretty similar to water dripping in another. The sound of your footsteps in this cave has a familiar sound of footsteps in a cave. And that robot lights the way, and its eyes light up a very wide beam of light, lighting the walls and off into the distance. And you're surprised at how long this cave seems to be. As you walk deeper and deeper into the cave, and as you walk deeper into the cave, so you begin to notice some drawings on the walls and signs that you're not the first person to have been here, or the first intelligent being to have been here. And you start asking the robot where they came from. And they explain how they were made by a civilization many, many years ago. And that civilization has long since left this world. And they'd left a handful of robots on the planet to continue to watch over the planet, to continue to monitor that planet. And they'd created the ability to leap from place to place. And from what the robot described, it sounded almost like they'd created the ability to leap through wormholes. But they seemed to be able to open these wormholes and create permanent wormholes without the need for physical technology in that location. And you were curious whether maybe that rabbit hole was one of these wormholes. And maybe that ancient civilization from this planet had visited Earth. And you're curious what other planets they may have visited. As you continue to explore in the cave, talking with that robot, asking more questions, deeply curious about the answers. And as you walked deeper into the cave, so you noticed that it seems to be opening up into a vast cavern. And then you see, just barely being lit up, what looks like an ancient temple deep here in this cavern. And you decide to go and explore that temple. And you walk all the way up to the temple. And you run your hands around the stonework. And notice that stone feels so cool under your fingertips. And it's been so smoothly made. And you can't see an entrance. So you walk your way around that temple, working your way around the temple, running your hand around the wall. And then at one point that robot just stops as you continue running your hand around the outside of that temple. And then after a little while you notice that you're walking out of the light and that the robot's no longer traveling with you. And so you head back to where that robot is and you ask them why they've stopped. And they just respond saying, "We're here." And you ask where. They say, "We're at the temple. We're at the entrance. We're here." And you look in front of you, and it looks no different to anywhere else around here. Just looks like solid stone. and you ask, "How do I get in?" And the robot explains that you just have to find the right spot. And so you continue to run your hands around that stone. Then eventually you find just the tiniest, almost like some dust on the stone, or the tiniest bit of gravel on the stone. And it's only because you're running your hands over it, and obviously your fingertips are so sensitive, that you notice that. And you apply just the slightest pressure in that place. And then the stone wall suddenly shoots to the side, almost like a very fast door opening. It seems to move out the way, faster than you could imagine such heavy stone moving. And you see this perfectly formed entrance into the temple, just so perfectly carved. And you walk into the temple with the robot following you. You can see your shadow extending out in front of you as the lights from the robot behind you shine on your back. And then you turn a corner in this temple and see what looks like just a dead end. And you turn to the robot and you say, "This is just a dead end. What's supposed to be in this temple? If that was the entrance, I thought there would be something here." And the robot said, "There is something here. You just have to hear it." And so you close your eyes and relax and listen. And you can hear that same windy, low rumble that you could hear before. Except now it sounds a little bit louder and a little bit closer. And with your eyes closed, just listening, you realize that you can almost hear it through your feet, as if that sound is actually traveling through the ground. And you suddenly have this feeling of confidence, this feeling like you understand. And you open your eyes and begin to confidently walk towards that wall. And as you arrive at that wall, so you feel that same experience you had at the rabbit hole. Almost like you're just falling through the wall, as if that wall's not even there. And you find yourself inside another stone structure. And just after you find yourself in that stone structure, so the robot seems to be behind you again, having followed you through that portal, lighting your way in this structure. And you find your way through this structure. You find a narrow path to follow, and you follow that narrow path. And then you find what looks almost like a spacesuit. And it's not quite like any spacesuit you've seen before. definitely not like an Earth spacesuit. You can recognize that it looks like it's designed to protect you in space. And the robot says that you should put that suit on, and you wonder why. And you wonder how, because the suit definitely doesn't look like it's made for humans. And the robot says, put the helmet on your head. And so you pick up the helmet and you put that on your head. And as you do, so the suit seems to leap off the wall and build itself around you, starting at the base of the helmet, almost like some kind of strange nanotechnology, fitting it perfectly to you wearing that suit. And as it gets down near your feet, the robot guides you to lift up one foot and then lift up the other. And as you lift one foot, the suit builds around the sole of your foot. Then you lift up the other foot and it does the same the other side. And you find yourself fully wearing that spacesuit. And then that robot says, let's go. And you wonder where. And then suddenly a doorway opens up in front of you. And you look out that door. And you can just see what you know to be a Martian-like landscape. And you've seen enough images of Mars to recognize that if you were here, this is what it would look like. With the slight red tinge to the sky, the tiny sun in the sky, reasonably dim up there. And you walk out onto this landscape. You turn around and you see that you've just walked out of what looks like a weathered pyramid, like a pyramid that's been here for so long that the wind has weathered it down to make it almost look like just normal rock formations. But you've just been inside there, so you know it isn't. And you walk and turn around to get as good a perspective as you can on it. And you realize you're now just walking on the surface of Mars, looking back at a pyramid here on Mars. And you know that for years, people on Earth have been talking about aliens coming from Mars, about canals on Mars, about life on Mars. And here you are on Mars, aware that at some point in the past, this seems to have been true. But you don't know what purpose these aliens would have had with building pyramids here on Mars. You can understand why they might want to go to Earth. But why would they come here to Mars? And then you see some movement on the ground. And you notice what looks a little bit like rats scampering around, just the cutest rats you've ever seen. But they look just slightly different, and somehow they're surviving here, not that far from the pyramid. And you notice how they seem to be coming out and then scampering back towards that pyramid. So you wonder whether they live somehow between these different portals and the locations of the portals. And all you can think is, these are space rats. And you almost make yourself laugh a bit, suddenly imagining rats in space, thinking it's the most ridiculous thing. You've come on a journey, on a cruise, and now you're stood on Mars, watching rats scampering around, just being the cutest little things. And that robot's still with you as you explore a little bit on Mars. And as the Martian sun sets, so you notice, off in the distance, among the stars, this pale blue star. And you realize that you're staring at the Earth, and that somewhere over there is the ship you're on, docked up at the island you're on. And now you're here. And many, many, many hours have passed. And you wonder whether anyone would even notice that you haven't been in that village, you haven't mixed with anyone, that you're even not around at the moment. And so you ask the robot, what am I doing here? Where should I go now? And the robot says to come this way and begins to lead you off down into a valley. And you head down into that valley as it's getting dark here on the Martian surface. And you notice there's another dead end, and you realize that that dead end is bound to also be another portal. And the robot explains that many of the portals are near each other, and that you can actually get a map of where the different portals go, so that you can traverse the galaxy from one planet to another, just knowing which combination of portals to walk through. And you think to yourself, mind blown, how you've just come on this strange adventure, something that totally changes people's perception on reality, their place in the universe. Knowing that once there was this deeply advanced civilization that may still be around somewhere, but may well have progressed long beyond here. And so you decide to head through wherever this is going to lead. and wearing that spacesuit, you walk through that wall and come out the other side. And you turn around to wait for the robot to follow you. And as that robot follows you, you notice that they are exiting a picture with the most beautiful golden picture frame, and that you seem to now be in some kind of a palace with marble floors that echo with each footstep. And the robot says it's okay to take off that helmet now. And so you remove that, and then suddenly all that nanotech suit undoes from around you and gathers inside the helmet. And then you hear this squeaking sound and see the little dragon creature pop itself out of your top pocket, as if to say that it's not been happy stuck in there under this suit all this time, as it climbs back up onto your shoulder. And you begin to explore this palace. And as you explore, so you can notice that smell of water. And so you walk around this area and you realize that it seems vaguely familiar. Not familiar in terms of somewhere you've been before, but familiar in terms of something you've learned about before. And you realize that it seems to be some kind of Roman or Greek baths. And you can hear the sounds of people here. And so you try to keep yourself out of sight. And you can see people with robes on and just towels around them, going and getting into the baths and just socializing and chatting and relaxing in that steaming, warm water. And you wonder where you are. And you ask the robot. And the robot says it's not so much about where you are now, it's more about when you are. Because the wormholes, these portals, are dotted all over. But the entrances and exits lead to the time differences of when they were placed. So you connect one with another, and they're connected in time as well as space. And when you are here is hundreds of years before when you were last here. And you realize this is way back in the past. And that's even more reason to remain out of sight because you don't want any strange stories starting about someone appearing out of nowhere, seemingly with magical powers, and seemingly with a floating robot they wouldn't understand. And you leave these baths to explore outside, and you recognize it as some kind of European countryside. And stood near the baths is the most beautiful white horse. And you climb up onto the back of that white horse and decide to go on just a little explore because you wouldn't want to miss an opportunity to explore the past for real. And you canter off on that horse with the robot traveling alongside you, that dragon up on your shoulder, heading into dense woodland. And you can notice through that woodland a lake in the distance. And you decide to head towards that lake. And the sun here is almost fully set as you pass through that woodland. And as you leave the woodland at the lake and dismount the horse, you can notice green lights of fireflies in the sky. And then you notice the most strangest thing. You notice a fairy fly down, land on the back of the horse. And this fairy somehow seems to be able to communicate with you. And the fairy begins to tell you that somewhere here there's a secret location that it had been rumoured a traveller from the future would come and find, and that you look out of place, and so you must be that traveller. And as that fairy continues to talk to you, so the fireflies fly down and join that fairy. And then the most beautiful butterflies you've ever seen land on the horse's back, slowly opening and closing their wings. And then some ladybirds land on the horse's back. And then you notice some rabbits coming out from the forest, coming out from that woodland, coming over to the horse, and some badgers. And so many of these creatures seem to be coming over, as if somehow they think there's something about you that they're drawn to. How somehow you seem to resonate with them. And you have this sense that there's consciousness in each and every one of those living creatures. And you start to realize that it's all too easy in everyday life to focus on humans perhaps being the pinnacle of advancement and consciousness, and almost dismissing animals as being second rate and not respecting them as living beings. And here they are, demonstrating their individuality, their consciousness, demonstrating that they have as much right to be around and live as anyone else. And a part of you seems to almost connect with this idea of everything being connected. And you decide that you'll follow this fairy and explore whatever it is that they're taking you towards. And you have this sense almost like you seem to have an entourage now. You've got this dragon on your shoulder, a floating robot, and now all of these animals traveling with you, and a fairy. And as you walk around this lake, following that fairy, the fairy takes you to what looks like a bit of a rundown house, almost like just a shack with white walls and a wooden door. And everything stops outside that shack. And the fairy says only you can enter. And the dragon jumps down off your shoulder. And you enter that shack. And as you enter, so you realize that you're in a vast room. And you're taken aback by this. So you leave that shack a minute. You look around the outside of the shack, and you very easily and quickly walk around the outside and decide that it's best to just accept what's going on. And so you enter that shack again, enter that vast room. You walk across that vast room and find a door. You walk through that door and find a room full of doors. And you try each door, and every door you walk through just seems to be another room full of even more doors. And eventually you find a room that seems to have no doors. So you enter that room, thinking that's the one that stands out as being different. And in this room, you can just see three paintings, one on the back wall, one on the wall to the left, one on the wall to the right, but no other doors. And so you walk and slowly look at each painting. You look at a painting of a lighthouse. You walk around the floor to the next painting. In that painting, you see the ocean and an island, and then walk around to the next painting. And at that painting, you see a sunset over the ocean. Then you go and stand in the middle of the room, trying to work out what all these paintings mean. And then you have this insight, given the way things have been going. Maybe these paintings are portals. And so you walk to that first painting. You reach out your hand, go to touch that painting with your fingertips. Your fingertips pass straight through the painting. And so you step through that painting, finding yourself on a cliff near a lighthouse and a bench, and the sound of seabirds, the crashing sound of the water below the cliff, and see that light as it scans out to sea. And you walk over to the bench. You sit on the bench, look out to sea, wondering why you're here. You've been led here by a fairy and told that only you can get what's here. And you explore the lighthouse. And in the lighthouse you find a small chest. And in that chest you find a tiny key. As you wonder whether that key is important. And if it isn't, you know you can always return it. But everything here looks like it's meant to be here, apart from this box and this key. So you take that key and you head back and step out of that painting. And then step into the next painting. And in that painting, you just explore a little bit. But you can't find anything here. And don't even really know where here is. So you leave that painting and go through the third painting. And in this third painting, as the sun's setting, you see what looks like a treasure chest on the beach. And you know it's a long shot. But you decide to use that key. And you wonder why, if this treasure chest has been here for a long time, no one's taken it or opened it before. And you decide to try and move that treasure chest and realize it doesn't move. It seems to be stuck in place. And so you assume that maybe that's why it's always been here. Maybe people have tried for years to move that treasure chest and they failed. And maybe as time's gone on, people have forgotten about this treasure chest. And you look around you and realize you're on an island. What looks like a deserted island, a small island, with just sea in every direction, as far as you can see. And you use that key to open that chest. And the lid pops open. And inside you see a glowing crystal. And as you reach in and touch that crystal, so you feel a deep sense of peace and calm. And you feel like the knowledge of that ancient race of aliens is transmitted through that crystal, almost like it's transmitted through the energy or the vibrations from that crystal, through your hand, almost like that energy transmits that transmits that energy up through your arm and into your brain. And you start having flashes in your mind of that alien race, of their technology, of their achievements. Almost like you start to see the network of portals throughout the galaxy and how those portals are positioned in time throughout the galaxy. As if somehow you've been led to here, to be the one to continue this knowledge on, or to start this knowledge afresh, to understand something deeper about your reality. And you take that crystal with you, leave that painting, and you head out, finding your way out of that shack, seeing all those animals still standing there. And the fairy smiles and says, "You've got what you came for." And you get back on the horse. The dragon gets back on your shoulder. And you head back through, finding your way back to where you came from. And the robot comes with you as you head back through those baths, back on Mars, back to that cave, and eventually out of the rabbit hole. And as you come out the rabbit hole, so you notice that now the sun has set, and you feel so exhausted for the journey you've been on. And you feel in your pocket and realize you've still got that crystal, that everything you've experienced was real, that this wasn't a dream. And you decide to sit down by a lake. You decide just to rest for a little bit, because in the morning you've got to continue with your cruise. And you rest there, gazing up into the sky, being aware of the stars twinkling, looking up at the moon. And as you look up towards the moon, so you can see a tiny dot moving across the sky. And as that tiny dot moves in front of the moon, you wonder whether that was the space station. And as you wonder, you close your eyes. And with your eyes closed, you begin to have this sense of floating and drifting and being in space, in that space station, looking out of the windows down on the earth, watching as the planet moves by beneath you, enjoying that weightless feeling, aware that it's a bit like that feeling when you jumped out of the plane, aware that your hair feels unusual as there's no gravity to hold it in place, and thinking to yourself that it's strange how people think that in space there's no gravity, when in reality it's just that you're falling to Earth and you keep missing the planet, and that gravity is forever dragging the space station to Earth, but it's traveling so fast. You're just spinning around and around every 90 minutes or so around the planet, and that gives the sensation of weightlessness. And then you find yourself back thinking about being at that lake, hearing the gentle water on the shore, just lapping near your feet, noticing the way the moon twinkles on the surface of that lake, the occasional sound of birds in the woodland, as you find your way back to a hotel you're staying in, and head up to your room, into bed, and relax down and drift and float asleep, knowing that you can continue your journey around the world, continue your cruise in the morning, curious whether every stop is going to have adventures like these, but knowing that you know now where all the portals are on Earth and how they connect through the whole galaxy and time. And with that thought, you drift deeper and deeper asleep.